Computer. Hey there, everyone. So what happened is that I didn't upload it right onto the YouTube. I did it live and then I did something wrong. So I'm gonna just do it over. And I'm so like, oh my God, I just like did a dump, I got it all out there. And so here I am just doing it again through Zoom, and then I'll save it and I can upload it. I got to figure out this YouTube thing better. So I think I had described what happened with the young woman, Callie, who came to our meeting, and told this horrific story. And then it brings me out into the community, which I wasn't really going to a lot. And I was, I don't know, like 30 plus years sober, and was going to just this, small women's meeting. That was a good meeting. A lot of really nice women, people just talking about what happened that week. Not a lot of, craziness said there. And so her coming to the meeting brings me out into the community. When I go to these mixed meetings, which I had stopped going to because they were just so gross, I was like horrified, And at what I saw and the type of men that I saw, and I made like some announcements that we were going to do this safety work. And then women started coming to me and tell me that they were raped. Yeah, like they didn't say, oh yeah, there was like hardly any talk about sexual harassment and 13 stepping. It was about rape. So I tried to get some of the women to, did you go to the police? No, why didn't you go to the police? Okay, I'll go with you to the police. And so that was like a dead end. Because for one, the people are embarrassed that they're going to AA. Like, I'm sorry, but this is not Hollywood. These are meetings, these are regular people. And so that happened. And then what happens is that I go home and I call a friend who was president or general manager of the World Service office in New York City, which is, it's a big office where people are paid $350,000 a year. There's a group of people that are paid very well. And so anyway, I called him and I told him what I found. And I knew him from Hawaii. And he said, you need to talk to this guy, Paul, who lives in Southern California, and he cares a lot about this safety issue. And he wrote a letter to the board. And I think it was in 07 or 08. He writes a letter to the board, and I'll put a link down here. And he says, and so I call him up and he said, okay, look, I'm just going to send you the letter first. It's 7 or 8 pages. And after you read it, then call me back. So I read the letter and I'm like running around my house, with, telling my husband about this, and started crying. And it was about rape. It was about multiple rape. It was about child molestation. And it was about systemic sexual predation. That's it. And some other dangerous things, but that was like the focus of it. But then, so I called him up and he told me that the board had made him a year to read the letter even. So they have meetings, monthly, and I think it was quarterly where these kind of things would get read. So they made him wait a year. And then I come along like, it's 2009 or 2010. And so anyway, I go back to my group and I read this letter to them. I say, we need a business meeting, emergency business meeting. Let me read this to you. And I read it and women are crying and they're like, oh, we need to do something about this. So what will we do? And so I said, well, why don't we have like some kind of a safety meeting where we could have like a workshop? So I called Paul back. He said, I'll help you design it. And then after that, we came up with something very basic. That we made flyers, and I went back to the women's group, and there were 5-6 core women who helped me write literature, like helped me write the poster, helped me write, anything I was going to hand out because I wasn't good at that. And then Callie and I went to meetings in the West LA area, and the reaction was visceral, and it was pretty nasty. But then there was always people who would come up and they'd say, oh my God, yeah, like we need to do something like that. And there's that guy over there, he's a rapist. And I was like, oh Lordy. So one of the really bad places was the Marina Center. And then there's another place, the VRC, that started very small and wasn't very active, was not popular, became that way. And I went there, and pretty nasty looking meetings, not all of them. I mean, but the one I went to, they told me which ones to go where the seemingly predators would be, and looked to me like they were there. So now I'm like going, okay, like this is really bad. And it's like I lived in Hawaii for 8 years and I have friends there, or I had friends there. I still have some friends there. But so I call a few of them And then one of them calls me back and says, oh, oh, I know what happened. I went to a women's conference and I was going to plan on going to see how things were in Hawaii with this situation. And I go there and we're all eating, the little group of us that I knew for 30 years. These were all, steppers that were my friends, and some still are. And they said, oh my God, Monica, like this murder happened. It's like having to do with the safety thing you're talking about. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, like this woman and her daughter, a 13-year-old daughter, were murdered by a guy that she met in AA. So I was shocked and I said, well, how's that happening? And so they were like, well, I don't know, but one of my friends, my long best friends, actually knew the little girl, and because it was near the church that she went to. So I come home and the stuff I find it on the internet, I find the news, and this part is in my film, The 13th Step, if you don't know about my film. And that is on Amazon, it's on Vimeo, and it's on Tubi. Tubi's free, Amazon Prime is free, and then Vimeo is $1.99 if you want to rent it. So I come home and there's a story, but there's nothing really linking it to AA. And I'm like, okay. So then what happens is that I call the television station, I call the newspaper that printed it. But then a week later, another article is printed and it says red flags missed. And this is where they talk about that she met him in an AA meeting, like they actually say it in the article. And so then I'm like, oh my God. And that he was court ordered, killer was Claybourn, I think his name is Claybourn Connelly, was court ordered by a judge and a healthcare professional to Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was a known violent man. He was a vet who was, just really lost it. And he was a violent person. And so he stalked her. So at first the story was that she was dating him and it was unrequited love. Like there was a lot of stuff that was not true. And as I kept digging and digging, I found out, she wasn't interested in him. And I called her workplace. I called her, I finally talked to her best friend. Like, I don't know, in the beginning, she didn't want to talk to me. And then so anyway, I'm like, how is this happening? How are people being court ordered? Violent offender is that AA is being used as a dumping ground. So I'm like 30 something years sober and had no idea. So I called my friend Greg, who was the, general service manager in New York, which is like the president of AA. It's a real nonprofit. It's a 501c3. So you got to have a leader, you got to have a president, vice president. All these people are paid very good money. And anyway, he said, oh yeah, of course, do it all the time. And I said, well, that needs to be stopped. And he said, well, I don't actually remember what he said. And I was like, no, that needs to stop. So I did. Now I'm just remembering now that I did talk to somebody. I can't remember her name now, but I did talk to a person who was an employee there. These people are all AA members and employees. And she said, oh, well, honey, we did, when the courts wanted to, send people, we did a group conscience. And, people said that it didn't matter, they didn't care. And I said, something, like that's a joke, because as a GSR, which at the time I was a GSR, and I had been for a year then, what I learned is that, like, say if there's 100 groups in LA, which there were more than that at the time, and that there's like 70 GSRs showing up on the West Side once a month for these, meetings for the AA service structure. Okay, so if there's 4,500 meetings a week and there's only 72 GSRs there, how many are represented? Very few. So it was seriously underrepresented. And I could really see how, like nowadays, if you did something online, this is getting off topic, so I'm going to move on. But I was like, sorry, but if you were to ask people today, including myself, do I want people court ordered here? I would say absolutely not. That you can't mix them, people who hate AA, people who don't want to be there in the group, because it changes the energy, it changes the dynamic, and they're angry, they're hostile, and even if they're good people, they don't want to be there, and nobody should be forced there, right? In fact, they're breaking the traditions. So all of us who know the traditions know that nobody is supposed to go there. Like they read it over and over again, which is how the brainwashing happens, that only those who desire to come here are here. No, that's actually not true, right? So you have all the DUI people, and I had an idea, but I didn't know how egregious it was. I didn't know that if you were on parole, that you could be like really a high chance you could be sent there. Even if you did your time, it's like you're never done, never done. Do your time. And well, now they're just letting them all out, but that's another whole subject, and it's not what I'm going to talk about. So what happens is I get the feeling like I'm really in a learning curve, and I start like searching on the internet, and I find this thing called the Orange Papers. Now that was also the beginning of the end, which was the Orange Papers, and there was a blog called Stinking Thinking where there were a ton of ex-steppers who came to talk. There used to be a Yahoo chat group, and that was kind of dying off as this blog was there. Orange Papers was just a site. It's still there, but it's like this big encyclopedia, out there in the big cloud. So I read this letter. I'm horrified. I go to Hawaii. Okay, we find about this murder. And then I get really inspired to do a safety meeting, right? So I'm going to do a safety meeting. And let me just see how everything is going here. Yeah, it is recording. Okay, it's like, oh my God, am I recording? Am I not recording? So what happens is we get a flyer, and we start going around into meetings that I don't go to anymore. I've never been to, and say, hi, we're going to have a safety meeting, sexual harassment, and people, wow, it was like visceral. And there were people who come up and say stuff to me. And then I was like, I told my husband, you better come with me because I don't feel safe. And then like, I didn't really want to go to certain places that I say, okay, we'll do this once. We'll make the announcement, we'll leave flyers, and we'll get the fuck out of there. Right. So it felt really dangerous. Actually, it felt very dangerous. I mean, I did this earlier, and then it didn't save it in YouTube, and I couldn't upload it, and I could not believe it because I just was able to tell the story so fluidly and easily, and I'm having to do it again. So I hope that I can tell it. So if I just stay in the, just tell you the story of why I left. So we have this murder, and I'm starting to find out how seedy things are. And then I take it to the Sunday meeting once a month that all the GSRs meet at, which I was a general service rep. And I want to address here that when they want to, they don't want to be responsible, says, oh, we can't tell our members how to act, and we're not connected to the groups, but yeah, they are. So every meeting is supposed to have a general service rep. And the reason is so you can go back to New York, and you can connect to New York, and you can give them money. You can give them the money, the little pie that they cut up of how much you should send to New York. And it's in the millions. It's like, those dimes and those, well, now they're probably, quarters and dollars and maybe even $5 and $2 bills. They started saying things like, well, if you can buy a Starbucks, you can put $5 in. So they actually ask for the money. And that money flows back to New York with stupid treasurers like I once was, sending a portion of it, right? So what happens now is that we go out to the meetings, okay, and I plan. I go to a church, and I get a date, and we have the workshop, and it might have been about 60 people. We had 10 tables, 10 people at a table. We had one person taking notes. People were sharing. I gave a talk. We had somebody else give a short talk, and then we said, okay, this is gonna be a workshop, so talk about it. We're gonna take notes, and we're gonna give notes back, and I'm gonna take all those and I'm send them to New York. And man, what came out of that? So there was a rapist in West Covina. There was an older woman like myself that brought letters from young women that were 20 and 21 who were raped, not willing to come forward at that point. We had people from meetings in like Manhattan Beach, where there was a lot of really like heavy duty intimidation, bullying going on in a meeting. That part was not sexual, but it was very scary to the regular nice people that were going. And then you had, so there was that going on. There were like people telling who they could date, who they should go out with. People like telling them, I mean, we all know the level of control, but at this point is pretty sick. Like, so I knew the difference between, say, a Pacific group type of group and a regular meeting, and then a sort of very laid back, laissez-faire meeting. And so anyway, people come, they talk about it. I'm shocked. We put the notes together, and then I sent them to New York, and I said, look, it's a serious problem here, and we need to do something about it. So at the time, they have Pacific PRASA, PR, Pacific Regional Service Assembly, big conferences, like 500 people from an area. So this is like the Pacific region, which would include all the states here, you know, Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, California, even Arizona. So people came from everywhere. And it happened to be in LA. And I was trying to get on the agenda to talk about safety. And nobody would give me the time of day. And at the last minute, Callie and I see on this little pamphlet that at 9 o'clock at night on whatever night, maybe it was Friday, that we had a room, meeting room that could hold, I don't know, 50, 60 people to talk about this. Well, it was packed. There was like 100 people in there, and there were people hanging out the window, people sitting on the floor. And I forget who was running it, but it should have been recorded. I mean, if I was making a film, I would have recorded it. It was unbelievable. I did take some notes. I took incredible mental notes. There was a beautiful young Latina woman who stood up and was crying about her friend who committed suicide after being sexually harassed, which is 13 stepping. So it's one thing to say, hey, baby, you know, come over here. You're really cute, like snide remark, to somebody seducing you and telling you, let's go study the big book, and then fucking you, and then telling you to get the hell out of there after they were done with you, right? And so there's a lot of that. There was a lot of that in Alcoholics Anonymous. There was that when I went in 1975, and I would say that it got increasingly worse. Like back then, there would be just the one guys who were doing it, and then it became like a free for all. It seemed to me like, you know, it just got continually worse as people were sent there, as you know. But you know, I found out, you know, by interviewing people all over the country, that there were people back in the 70s who were sent to AA who were pedophiles. Yeah, they didn't even have a drinking problem. They were pedophiles, and it was her father. And then she was like sent there for like one DUI in Ohio. But okay, so what happens next is, God, I'm all over the place. Prasa. Oh yeah, I got to tell you another story about Prasa. So that was a big win. And the couple that ran it, God bless them, they were really trying to help in a very quiet way, because they would have been, you know, given the cold shoulder and really been iced out if they would have said, yeah, you know, let's give Monica and Callie a shot at it. Let's do, you know, it's needed, you know, and like, but there's a lot of like, I don't know what to call it, you know, where they all come, suits from New York, and they wear suits, and they're like, oh, you know, I'm the delegate. And oh my God. Now there were some good people. There were a couple of really great people. Madeline was one woman who fought for this issue to be addressed. Was sexually harassed, actually attacked in her newly sobriety. She's a really pretty woman, very sweet, from the Midwest. And then there was Paul, who was fantastic. And, you know, but for some of these people, AA is their life. Like for me, I thought maybe it was, but maybe because I went in so young, and then I had my kids, and I was smart enough to not, you know, bring my kids to it, my babies. And I knew my babies were more important, and I needed to be home with them. And at that point, I probably went to one meeting a month in somebody's house. And that went on for a couple of years. There was that period where from, you know, 15 years sober till, you know, I don't know, whenever. But in here, I was still pretty brainwashed. And, you know, we'll talk about when I get out and how the brainwashing, how I get unbrainwashed. But I want to talk about why. Why did I leave after being so brainwashed and so like pro AA? So this continues. Okay, so here's the next story. So I'm sitting, you know how in a conference, like it's a big conference, it's a hotel, the Sheraton or something, you know, by LAX. And we had a big conference room, a big ballroom, and, you know, chairs for 500 people. And then you would split off and do these other groups. So I went to like a hospitality room, and we were having coffee, and the Spanish community was there, and they came up and said, excuse me, and like, we would like to talk to you. Would you come and sit, and we're going to translate, and we want you to tell us what you're doing. And so I said, okay. I was like really excited. And so I go over and I showed them my little flyer. I don't know that I had a beginning pamphlet then. I think it was a big postcard. And I kept rewriting this postcard with the help of a few other people. Like I would write it and then I would need help. So there was about maybe 10 people, a lot of men and women, very mixed, all ages. And I told them what I was doing, and they said, well, you know, there's young women, early 20s, and, you know, the older men with a lot of time are doing their fifth step. You know, they're making them read the fourth step up in the mountains. And after they do it, they want to have sex with them. And I was like, what? And they're like, and I said, where? In Mexico? And they were like, no, in America, like right up there, in California, up in the mountains. And I was like, what? They're like, yes. And so they said, can we have, how can you help us? And I was like, well, who? Do you know who they are? And they knew. They said, yeah, some of them, yeah. And, some of them were these highly respected guys. It's just so sick. Thing about the Spanish population in AA, in my experience, that at the end of the day, what they did is they said to me, can we have this? Well, this didn't happen at this time, but like a year later, as my literature evolved and we had like even a poster, she said to me, can we take your literature and translate it into Spanish and put it up? And I said, absolutely, just take it. And so she took it. And then later she called me, or I called her to check in, and she said that they just translated it into Spanish and they stuck it up on the wall and they handed it out. And I think they were somewhere in the Inland Empire. So that was a win. That was very positive. That also happened in a gay meeting in West Hollywood, a very, very early meeting. I don't know why these people go to meetings at 6 a.m. It's not church, but they asked me to do it because as I was doing this work, I started to wind up in different places in the city, and people would see me and say, would you come speak? So I actually was really honest. I started to talk about my unraveling, like how I was like really disturbed by what was going on, what was finding out, court ordering and everything. And they were like, oh, honey, and I was like, whoa. But what they did is I had a very new card and I had a stack of them. And he's like, can we have these? And I was like, yeah, sure. And he goes, thank you. And he said, I'll take that. And he walked over to where the literature was and he goes, done. And I just cracked up because, the regular community, the heterosexual community, white men, I was going to have to go through all kinds of hoops, and I was not allowed to write this literature. In fact, I called when they were giving me pushback. I called my friend from Hawaii who had run New York for 10 years. And I said, they're telling me I can't write this literature that our group can't. And he said, of course you can. But when I went to the meeting, the structured meeting, I can't even remember now. It's so funny. I'm so glad I can't remember, but it was the monthly meeting for the area, for LA, West LA, and it included West Hollywood. And, they wanted to vote on it. And I said, what do you mean? You haven't even discussed it? Like, what are we going to vote on? And I want to talk to, all the DCMs, which are district committee members. I mean, AA is like, they're so full of shit. It's just so full of shit. The way the pretense is that, and the way Hollywood, displays it in film and television, which is another whole video, that it's just these little meetings, whether it's on Mom on CBS or whatever shit show it's on. And not that I'm calling these shows a shit show, but this showing it, portraying it this way is so dishonest, because these pods are all connected in a way where they wind up where the people who are GSRs were the do-gooders, like I used to be, the brainwashed steppers that are going to, we're going to carry the message into the prisons and we're going to carry the message everywhere. Well, you know what? It was already in there. It's already fully embedded. And so, yeah. Being a GSR helped me leave. It helped me to see the bullshit. In fact, there was a guy who, he seemed nice enough, older than me by, I don't know, this is a good 10, 12 years ago. So maybe he was in his late 50s, early 60s, good looking, for his age and everything. And he was in charge of drumming up the GSRs and all the meetings. And one Sunday morning, this woman came in and she was in her night dress, meaning that, your cocktail dress, from the 50s, and the boot, you could see through, it was really tight. And she had a figure kind of like Marilyn Monroe, sort of, and the hair was all a mess. And you could tell that something must have happened between the two of them. Sorry. Anyway, it was just really? It's almost like, was it Eric Schneider? Who's the guy? I better get it right if on YouTube, but he was the governor of New York and got into all that trouble before the other governor. Isn't it crazy? All the way. And it's funny because I did write a letter of complaint about AA to him when he was the the governor about sexual harassment. So in a nonprofit that was being completely, overlooked. So now the whole thing with the Mexican thing, like, really disturbed me. So I came back, I called Greg and told him about it. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, what can I do? And so then I talked to Paul again, and then I created more workshops and I tried to document it and send it. But, I got to say it was hard. Like, so we sent letters to New York and emails, and they just like, oh no, like the guy who like took up the charge to tell us that we were, nothing was really going on. And we're like, okay, so like my shirt isn't burgundy, right? It's green. Like, it was that kind of thing. It was just really crazy. And as this, and also the people in that group started to really, really ice me out. But then there were a handful of really, really beautiful people that wanted this to happen, that knew it needed to happen. And then there was the whole thing about the rapist in West Covina, and there was more than one. And there was a meeting at the Triangle Club. What was it called? I can't remember now. It's a kind of famous club where there's meetings all the time. And we finally got the girls to come forward. They had brought letters where they signed and said that they were having to exchange sex for a room in the sober living. And the sober living was a legitimate one. So, we got to, it was almost like having to figure out how this beast of sober living and rehab, that came later. I still was clueless. I didn't know a lot about that. And that'll be another topic that I'll do. But me and this older woman who is since passed, I was Harriet. Oh my God, she was such a great woman. And she got this young girl to go to the police. I found out that she had to go to like just the city over. And I called the different police departments, and they said, we know all about him. If you can get her to come here, then we can go arrest him. So she got her to go. And then 5 police cars pulled up outside the club. And I think it was called the 502 Club. And so cops will pull in, they go in and they arrest him and pull him out. Now, it was a really big deal out there. And it took a group of us to make it happen. And yes. And what happened with the girls, though, is that a couple of them, they weren't girls, they were young women, like I said, in the early 20s, ran off to a rehab where they were going to stay for a year because they didn't want to deal with anything. And they were really afraid, actually. And, I didn't know why they were afraid. And now I know. So, okay, that happened. So we go out there and we do a workshop there. And that was crazy. That was so crazy. And that's where I met a man who he was 13 stepped and by like a cougar kind of woman. And that ruined his marriage. And he was like a really sweet guy, really good guy. And there's just some people that were so kind to me and supportive, and were just afraid to really totally speak out because they knew they would have been completely ostracized by their community of 35 years. And not everybody was married and had a happy marriage or in children to be with, like I did. I had a great husband and a new second marriage, and my teenage boys. So, okay. So what happens next is Paul has a really big, what do you call it? Safety workshop down in Oceanside. And I go, and I don't remember if he asked me to talk or not. It's really like strange that I can't remember this, but I went, and if I did, I remember keeping it really basic. Maybe I didn't talk, but I went there and passed the pamphlet to everybody, and you could see who was supportive and who was giving me dirty looks, but didn't matter. So it's almost like, because I knew I was leaving. It was like a year prior to leaving. I left in the spring of 2011, and I knew that it was over. And what happened is I started to feel like really I didn't belong. And then there was a part that when I went to a regular meeting where when I heard the literature read, I was like, well, that's not true. No, that's not true. That's not true. And so even the traditions filled, just lies in the preamble. Like, we are, men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. And that we, it was just like, yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, that's not true. That's bullshit. And television was not that bad. I don't know whether my film like stirred up a bunch of hornets' nests, but man, TV, like, I forget his name. He's a huge producer, writer, came out with Mom on CBS. It was like one big fucking AA commercial from the 1980s. But let me keep moving with why I left. All right. The next thing happens is, I think this is the next thing that happens, is Carla Brada's murder. And somebody from across the country in upstate New York tells me, "Oh my God, look in the news." But it was the LA Times, and it was like not on the front page. It was like way back hidden. It was like a piece that was like this big about this murder out in Santa Clarita. And so what am I going to do with this? I mean, so I looked, and I didn't really find anything else, and dug a little more, and then kind of just like put it on the side. And I decide that the Kristine and Sandra Cass murder happened in August of 2010. So it was then I knew I was going to leave, but that I was going to try to do as much safety work as I could. And we literally went to the Marina Center, and we put up I made giant posters, and we put it up, and they ripped them down. And then I had a friend, Kevin had a buddy, and he was in the program too, and we put them up, and we nailed them up, or we screwed them in. The next day they pulled them down. Then I went to speak to the owner of the building and told him his liability, and that he had a liability to protect people for safety. And so he let me put something up on the podium that everybody had to read, and everybody didn't read it. And I just didn't feel like being a cop. Then I meet a woman, word cuts around that this woman, Rosie, who I did post her video up, and I did a long interview with her, who had a really tragic childhood. And there was a younger guy. I mean, she wasn't a young woman. She's probably in her 60s, 50s or 60s. And he was in his early 30s. And he was grabbing her. And she was an outed lesbian. She didn't like men, but she was very sweet. She told me it was really sad. Went to her apartment, and we talked, and she told me her story. And we went to the police, and the police were like, "Oh, there's nothing we can do." I'm like, "What do you mean there's nothing you could do? It's called, what is that called?" And I didn't even know a name for it. It was called battery, right? Assault there's like levels, like even a sexual assault, there's rape, but battery is when somebody grabs your tits, or somebody grabs your butt, or whatever. So, the Harvey Weinstein thing hadn't happened yet. So the police department still were not handling like this kind of stuff very well. And then I also didn't realize that, the police were sent there, and, just like everybody's been sent to AA when they get into trouble for a long time to get their asses out of a jam. I didn't know about the pilots, nurses, and doctors. That's another whole story. But it's a story that helped me leave, to find out that people were required to go at the punitive way that a pilot must attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and they have to talk the talk, or they're not going to fly again. They're going to, ruin careers of 30 years, and nurses 5 years, and they're asked, "Oh my God, they are the worst." That Nurses Association. I called them, and it's just a lot of work. It's a huge, huge problem. Doctors' lives ruined. There's a dentist that I'm in contact with, and the pilots have finally come together. A pilot wrote a book, and I interviewed a pilot because I actually began to make another film to expose more of the rehab, sober living thing right before the pandemic in 2019, and I stopped making the film. But I did a lot of interviews, and I flew to West Palm Beach to interview the district attorney there, who had done a lot of work to expose the body brokering and all the criminal stuff going on down in Florida, which was a big deal. But in California, it was just still going on, like happy days are here again, whatever. So this also, if you're wondering whether you should leave, and you were to find out that there are people in the room, professionals, who are forced there to go, and they're treating AA and like the program, which to me is like not a program, the fake program, the like stupid like steps and whatever, like it's some kind of like really good thing. And sorry, a little messenger coming in there. So I'm almost done. I think I can get this done soon. Oh my God, I've been here way too long. I don't know if this is 35 minutes, but okay. So I'm really getting depressed. not in the clinical sense, but like, this is over. And Callie leaves. She left the summer of 20. She said, I'm getting the hell out of here. I don't want to be in the city anymore. And I just, my husband said to me, I think you should leave. He was going to, but he said, I don't think you're going to do any more in it. I think you should leave to do it. And then I took a class at UCLA for documentary filmmaking. And my teacher told me, yeah, you should make that film, Monica. And I began. Now, because of the safety workshop in Culver City, when the people came from West Covina, people started, that's when Facebook began, or at least when I became aware of it. And there was a woman keeper whose son was murdered by his sponsor in the Carolinas. And she and I were talking on Facebook. I picked up the phone and she agreed to be interviewed. And I hired a young filmmaker right out of film school. She was 25 years old, Annette, who taught me how to make like the first thing. And she held the camera, and we drove like, I don't know, an hour and something away. And we filmed her, and she told this crazy, crazy story of just a lot of really sick pedophilia going on in that part of town. And so I began with that. And then the woman from the blog turned me on to a board member. Okay, so he was on the AA board, and he and I started talking, and he agreed to be interviewed, and I couldn't believe it. And so I got the camera, and I was not a cinematographer, and a friend came with me, and I drove 800 miles to his house in Colorado, and I interviewed him. And the interview was long, and it was like an hour. And I think he only has like, sound bites in the film, because I mean, honestly, this really needed to be a limited series, but limited series didn't exist yet on Netflix. It wasn't a thing. And I still think that's something that's needed. There should be a limited series that's documentary style, and then there needs to be a fictional narrative that goes along with it so that people can really see what's going on. All right. So I drive out, I interview him, and I'm blown away. I'm just blown away. And so I begin the process of saying, I'm making a movie. But I've left. Now I want to talk about very specifically leaving when you're, and even if, you don't have the years that I did it, I don't think it matters with some people if they get so involved. What I said to myself 6 months before I left was, okay, I'm going to go. I went to every week. I'm going every other week. I took a job as a treasurer on purpose so that I could tell someone else to do it. So I could not make it a priority, if you can understand that. So because I was such a good stepper, it'd be like, oh, I have to go because I'm the treasurer and I have a job and all this other horseshit, right? So anyway, every other week I went, and I'd call somebody like, that day or the day before. I would call Carol. She was great. And I'd say, I can't be there. Can you just, get the money for me and do the treasury job? And then what began to happen was I said to myself, okay. And then the other rule is that if anything comes up with my husband or my kids, that's a priority. And so you're not going to go then too. So on top of every other week. And so what happened was something happened. And I felt this like, it like lifted, and it was over there, and it was no longer in me or in my head. And I know if you're in a cult and you left, you know what I'm talking about. That it didn't have the control over me. And I began to prioritize, right? Because I would say, oh, the most important thing is going to me. No, sorry. No, that's not true. Your family comes first, your children come first. And so when I did that, and even your job, right? So, maybe in the beginning when people they need priorities to be a little different, but you don't neglect your family and your children to go to a meeting when you're 30 years sober. And there are people who do that. And it's an ego thing, or 15 years sober. I'm sorry. Those people have no desire to drink. They just want to go get their ego, or they want to sit around and talk shit, or until they want to talk about whatever, how it used to be and what it was like. Or they want to laugh. There's people who are funny who go there, and they make people laugh, and it's camaraderie or fellowship, whatever. But, so there was another murder. Okay. Actually, this murder happened after I left, and that's what took my husband out. So I leave, I'm making the film, and now I'm feeling like I'm in the middle of two worlds. But let's get back to when you go. So if you go to, there are people, a lot of people coming into the Facebook groups. They're leaving AA and deprogramming from AA or any 12-step group. And say you go 5 days a week, just go 4 days a week. And then after a month, go 3 days a week. And after another month, go 2 days a week, and just make your plan. Like, I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just saying I needed a plan. And then I actually talked to people. I talked to people on the phone. It was before this chatting, all this freaking texting. I was I'm old fashioned. I'm a little bit older. We talked to people on the phone. So there were people who reached out to me. That ex-board member talked to me a lot. Ilsa talked to me. Michelle Dunbar, who created the Freedom Model with Stephen Slade and Mark Sharon. I don't think I met Mark early on, but I talked to him much later, and he was very helpful. But Stephen Slade talked to me, and I got to meet him. Then he agreed to be interviewed. And I don't think I went, I don't remember if I went to New York a couple of years later. But you know, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. So where am I at? I'm at that I'm explaining about how I left. That's right. Where if you feel like people are like, oh, I don't know what to do. So don't just like leave like that. A lot of people can, but I chose not to because I had things to tie up, right? I wanted to do more work with the Make AA Safer project. And I kept remaking the pamphlet and remaking it until I liked it. I mean, I would redo it now. I would change it now. It was called the Green Pamphlet. And I think it was very good for the time. And I think I'll put a link to it, the PDF, that people can see it at the bottom of this. And what else happened? So we kept, back and forth with New York. New York was like just giving me the cold shoulder. Did I tell the story about the woman who I spoke to when I found out that they were sending sex offenders? And she said, oh, don't worry, we can get over that. We're Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, no. What do you mean? Like you want like sex offenders to go to AA meetings? Like they should go to separate meetings. They shouldn't be mixed in with us. And she didn't agree. So then I knew I was feeling, and she was a woman. So I was like, the mindset was a little weird. And I also found that there was a type of woman in AA that was kind of predatory. They were defending the predators. And our society doesn't like to talk about women predators, but there are women predators. And might be anyway, we've seen actually a lot of stories come out with them, especially in California. I saw those in the news, a teacher with a 12-year-old and things like that. But that's not the story. So we're going to stick on the point. So I explained how I left. When I left, I felt exuberant. I felt overjoyed. I felt so free. And then it was like this wave of sadness of wasted years. And I was really upset about that. But instead of being angry, I was sad. I cried. I was like, I wasted my fucking life. I wasted how many years? And then I was blogging about it on my blog before my blog got hacked, because that got hacked, that did. And my blog, Leaving AA, got created when Stinking Thinking was taken down, which was a place for all of us to talk to each other before Facebook. My blog was very busy. It had hundreds of millions it was a lot. It was very busy. And I would post things, and there was this lawyer who said, stop judging yourself, Monica. Like, I went to Harvard Law School, and I was brainwashed too. And you can see in the NXIVM cult, I don't know if any of you've seen that, the NXIVM, man, wow, what a shit show that was. But I gobble that stuff up because I want to learn. I want to see how a cult gets exposed. And when I first left, I didn't call it a cult. I had a hard time, like just seeing it, because I just didn't want to. I didn't want to believe I was in a cult. But once you think of, there's a couple things, I didn't get how people got brainwashed so quickly. That I figured out. And that's not this video. But about leaving is that there was a lot of sadness, that I felt like I wasted my time. And that I did waste, so the social aspect of either drinking or not drinking is also very real. Now, there are plenty of communities, especially in La La Land here, like you have yoga groups and people that are really into health and fitness, who drink very little, that I missed quite a period of my life that I didn't get to drink socially. And so then there was this wave of sadness that I missed going back to college the way that I should have, right? I felt that way. And I no longer had listen to those assholes going like, oh, shoulda, woulda, coulda, you know, the stupid, it's called gaslighting, but I don't really like to use the word a lot, because even using that word, then everything becomes like we have a word for it. And there's too much of that right now. So we'll speak plainly here. And is that I realized that I had made choices that, and then choices that my life would have been very different. And even though that I was sober and I was in great shape, great health, that what did I do here? And why was I playing Miss AA as just a teenager who drank too much? And, you know, dropped out of high school and hitchhiked around the country. And, you know, now I think it's pretty interesting, but there were many years that I was regretful for not playing basketball and going to college like some of my friends did. I was a great ball player, but I think that I've resolved it, not 100%, but a lot. And I think that's why I continue to do the work to help people to get out when I realized how awful it was. And honestly, a lot of the stories now are not about rape and molestation, although there's going to be some, and we're going to interview some people and they're going to tell their stories. But it's about psychological abuse and bullying, crazy ass control, crazy. Okay. Groups like Food Addicts Anonymous, they're nuts. Overeaters Anonymous, they're crazy. All right. Now, I even went to Al-Anon. Al-Anon, the small meetings were fine, but the big meetings, no, super control freaks. And I didn't go towards those people. I didn't like those people, Pacific Group of those types. So I hope that helps. Oh, one other thing though. Okay, let's talk about this. I made a Blog Talk Radio, Safe Recovery, and it is up on iTunes. It's on Safe Recovery Blog Talk Radio. I made like 300 episodes starting back in 2011. And I began to interview people. And up here in my chest of books, I don't know, there's some 30 books up here. And, you know, when I hear people say they have a hard time deprogramming, I read a lot of books. It really helped. And they weren't all written and published when I started my journey, my leaving AA, but they got published and I read them. I just devoured them. And I also went to other alternative support groups. So Rational Recovery, I interviewed him and I talked to his wife and I read the books. That was not helpful to me. Talking to them was, but the book was not my thing. But I actually know quite a few people who were heavy drinkers who that type of approach helped them. Then I called Tom Horvath. I interviewed him. I'm sorry, I got this thing up here. That was fascinating. I couldn't believe that I had never heard of Smart Recovery. And so, you know, I got to be that person who sat on the couch, you know, on Katie Couric with Gabrielle Glaser. And it was because of her and her book that I got to sit on that couch and say, there's something called Smart Recovery. And Tom Horvath said the next day, there were just, I don't know, 10 new women in every meeting. So that was a good thing. And then I went to SOS, which was small. And it was, he served a purpose. I don't know if there still exists. And Moderation Management was small, but good, really good, very different. I learned about harm reduction. I learned about the Sinclair method. I met Claudia Christian, who created the C3 Foundation. And all of these things I was learning and actually doing. So let me back up here. I actually was going to all these little meetings in the end of my time in AA in the last 6 months. So I would actually go to a meeting and be honest and say, you know what, I'm like fed up here. And did you know that there's this thing and there's that thing? And young women, mostly young women, would come up to me at the end of the meeting and say, what was that thing you mentioned? And I said, Smart Recovery. Then I created a blog, Stop 13 Step in AA, that I still have not been able to get back in there because that was hacked. Some fuckers. So anyway, I think I'm done. I would like you, please subscribe to my channel here. Like it if you like the video, share it everywhere. Down below, you know, if you like what I said, if you don't like, please comment. If you'd like me to talk about another subject, I am going to try to improve this channel, make it better visually, like I see some of these other guys that I'm watching, and have people on with me, have panels, have 2 people on, have discussions, I'd like it to do a debate. I have a debate group in Facebook called Pro AA versus AA Critical Debate Group. So it sometimes gets quiet in there, sometimes it gets busy, but I told them I want to do a little debating with them. And the ones, sometimes you get nasty people, but we try to keep it tame. Anyway, I can't believe I talked this long. I'm sorry. I wanted to be simpler. I do want to say that I do think that I began to deprogram a long time before I left. And I realized that there were things about AA, as much as I loved it early on, that were not helpful to me at all, with some of my issues of abuse as a kid that I went through, and some family dynamics that were very, very difficult, that I began to see through that AA was going to fix everybody, how they tried to apply it across the board. You're going to use it for this issue and this issue. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I worked the steps through and through, and I'm sober, and yeah, I'm good, thanks. And but I was like pretty brainwashed in other areas. I went to big book studies. Oh my God, it was like such a stepper. But I'm free now. And I think everybody has a choice, and I'm going to leave you with this. If AA was a benign support group, you would just leave, like a cancer support group. I had breast cancer. I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I lost a part of my body, and I never wanted to go to those stupid support groups. I was like, no, thanks. And then you know what? I met a doctor, a really great doctor, who does the reconstruction and fixing after you lose that part of your body. And she does this outdoor stuff with women. She goes, nobody wants to be in a basement, right? And I was like, yeah, I don't want to be in a basement. So what was I saying there about, oh, damn, what is that about being brainwashed, or I don't know, I'm getting tired. I was so much more awake earlier when I did it the first time and it didn't get recorded. But the people, about doing it your own way, okay? That the sad thing and the really damaging thing about AA is that it's one size fits all. You saw it with Demi Lovato. You see it with many of the famous people who have died, that people didn't say, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to drink? Robin Williams, I heard, wanted to have a drink, one drink. Well, maybe if he was talking to Claudia Christian and he had a doctor who would have given him naltrexone, and he would have taken the pill and, been in a support system, even a group. There's a really great Sinclair Method group through Facebook, and then it's really organized, that you should leave the way you want to leave. I mean, I made a plan, and they suggested, the people who knew me in the blog, that I probably make a plan so that when I was done, I was done. And there was no regrets. Now, okay, sorry, there's one more murder I got to tell you about. And this is what took my husband out. This is Tracy White, who was murdered in downtown Los Angeles by 2 really, really evil people. And they came from Pennsylvania. And Tracy went alone to do I think a fake 12-step call. They intended to do real harm to him. And I went downtown to the courthouse to meet. Oh my God, this is bringing up another story. All right, so there's the Mexican rehabs that are near downtown LA. So I go down, I talk to the detective, and I say, no, he met him at a meeting. I'm telling you, my husband, somebody came to the meeting, to the men's stag, and told him he met them at a meeting or outside a meeting right in Hollywood. And he was like, no, this has nothing to do with AA. I said, no, I don't. Okay. Now listen, I went to the trial. I waited for years for that fair and speedy trial that took a long time. It was brutal. It was really brutal to sit through. He was decapitated. He was cut in pieces and put in bags. And they drank his blood. It was just like there was some kind of satanic ritual, whatever. And husband and wife team. And in the story, the DA was incredible. He wanted to bring part of the crime that happened in Pennsylvania. They had been arrested for kidnapping and tying up they were targeting these Black men, these big in shape. It was really like sick. It was really weird. And so I can learn how to turn off my messaging. And in the testimony from Pennsylvania, he's being interviewed by, I don't know who, I don't think it was probation. And I'm an addict, and and I go to NA, and I was like, there you are. There you are. He's calling himself an NA member to play that game. And some people actually go to meetings to prey on old timers who are sweet and good, like Tracy White was. And that was a really, really difficult trial to sit through, as well as Carla Brada's trial. Didn't talk about that because I was already gone for that. I mean, I was gone already too. And then that was it. My husband came home and he said, I'm done. I'm not going back. And so there was another story. Oh yeah. Okay. The detective who was handling the case, he was a career detective, big, tall, actually beautiful detective, probably my age or whatever year however you retire, I don't know. He said, that thing you said about, the AA, Tracy and all that you kept saying it was involved. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, there's this other case that is really disturbing. He said they're tying up people in these rehabs. They actually said AA on the outside of the door because they were Spanish speaking rehabs, and they were dying as they went through withdrawal because they weren't given medication, and you can die from alcohol withdrawal. And then they were throwing them out in the alleyway. I was like, what? It's like, yeah. I was like, well, give me the address. I'll go by there. He goes, no, I don't think you should go by there. And I'm like, yeah, let me go by there. Let me go knock on the door. And I was so clueless. It's like, I don't know who I thought I was, Murder, She Wrote or something. But anyway, I said, so how long has this been going on for? And he said, like, 7 or 8 years. I'm like, what? You haven't solved the case? He's like, no. He said, the coroner is furious. He said, like, this has to stop. And it's really sad because the Mexican families would come and bring them there in hopes they'd get help. And they would, they would sign a paper that they wouldn't sue or anything. And they're all embarrassed anyway. And they're not going to do that. And so that had been, I said, well, how many died? He said, well, about 7 or 8 a year. And I'm like, oh my God. Well, later, I got to do something about that. But I can't talk about that. Anyway, all right, guys. So please subscribe, like, tell me what you want to hear about, tell me what you don't like, tell me what you like. And I'm going to bring on some more people, and I'm going to be doing more and more videos, and hopefully I'll figure out how to do the YouTube live and how to do maybe a different platform from Zoom. Zoom it just looks awful. It's just so grainy, and figure it all out better. Okay. So again, take care, and I'll see you all on Facebook, and good night. See you next week. Bye.